All right. Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I hope everyone is enjoying this really nice weather. We are here today. And first of all, thank you all very much for those who heeded my advice and submitted questions early. We did get a lot of questions, so we're excited to answer those questions. We will, of course, have the chat box open for any questions if we have time to take them. Rules are the same. You all are already muted unless you are a panelist. We've got our executive team on here, and we're going to start the way we always do. Good morning, Commissioner Turner. I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Karen. Again, thank you, everyone, for jumping on. I appreciate you guys being here. I know there's a lot going on, and as Karen said, got a lot of good questions that came in today, and I really appreciate you guys participating in that and submitting those questions. Thank you for getting those to us early. I think everybody on the call knows that we take those serious and that we have discussions, are able to do some research to try to get you some answers. So because there were a lot of questions, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shut it down and open up shop and let Kara get started answering the questions. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, and like we mentioned, we did get quite a few questions, so we're going to get right into it. With the DIDD provider manual going away due to the integration, how are providers to address the external complaint resolution process now? Currently, we refer person supported and their family legal representative natural support to the DIDD complaint resolution coordinator. Will that transition to directing them to the MCO and TennCare only? Teresa has the complaint resolution under her shop, Teresa Sloan. So I'm going to turn over that question to her. Teresa.
Thank you, Kara. There's going to be no change to the complaint resolution process on 7/1. It's still going to use the DIDD process. That process will now be outlined within the MCO's provider manuals. But again, just carry on with what you're doing today on 7/1, and we will continue to follow that process through the Customer Focused Services unit.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Next question. We are seeing a rise in pushback from ISCs, no specific agency, when we ask an ISC to participate in a COS meeting to address and approve a psychotropic medication. The COS consent is required to comply with the state-mandated informed consent. Is there a flow sheet or written process for our agency to follow when the ISC does not want to comply with our request for a Circle of Support meeting? I'm going to turn this one over to Courtney Kelly, our Assistant Director of Accreditation and Person-Centered Practice. Courtney.
Good morning, everyone. So when you encounter these type of situations, the first thing that I recommend is that you reach out to the ISC director and try to work to resolve whatever the issue is around the COS and the ISC not participating with the ISC director. If you don't reach a resolution there, then in each region, there's an ISC liaison in each region. There's one in each regional office, so you can reach out to that person. If there's still an issue and your issue is not resolved, then you can reach out to the central office ISC liaison, which is Kathleen Chapman, and she will step in and provide assistance, gather information, and work through the process with you. If at that point there's still an issue, you can always reach out to me, and I will work through it with you with the ISC director until a resolution is reached. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Courtney. Next issue. We have an issue with ISC not submitting our request for additional change in services to plans review in a timely manner. Our agency provided the service as it was nursing, and we had to take care of the individual, but we are not able to bill DIDD for services we provided due to the failure to submit our request timely. My question is why should DIDD agencies suffer financial loss due to the ISC's agency's failure to request in time for us to bill? I'm going to turn this one over to Jordan and apologize that it took me a little while to get that question out.
Yeah, thanks, Kara. Good morning, everybody. Good question. So this is, we've been dealing with a similar approach for quite some time. In short, in the event that a provider agency is requesting, or a person supported more appropriately stated, is requesting a service change and the submission of a service plan, we only ask that provider agencies document their outreach to the support coordinator and their agency requesting the submission of the service plan. And then if there's a delay in that submission, ultimately that results in a delay of the approval, especially if a provider agency has had to provide the service. Usually, as was indicated in this question, there's some kind of emergent circumstance behind it or a change in treatment condition, then we will, as long as you've got documentation that supports the request was made, we will look at retroactively dating the approval. And in the event that there was a delay on behalf of the coordinator or the agency, then the department will address that directly with the support coordination agency. So make sure you keep documentation that supports the request. Reach out to your regional office with the dispute, then we'll obviously look at the documentation that you've got and handle it according to the way I just described. And again, it's the same way we've handled that for a decade or more.
Great, thank you very much, Jordan. Okay, our next question is, are lift and assist calls now reportable since there was no treatment provided at the time EMS came to the home to assist the person supported up? I'm going to turn that one over to Teresa Sloan.
Thanks, Kara. That is not reportable as there was no intervention or treatment provided to the person. That was simply assistance. So therefore, that would not be reportable.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Next question is going to go to Pat Nichols, our Assistant Commissioner for Quality Management. In July, providers will be contracted with MCOs and not DIDD. Does this mean that the DIDD provider manual will no longer be valid? If so, how will DIDD QA function since much of the QA content is based on the provider manual? Pat.
Thanks, Kara, and good morning, everyone. You are correct that the provider manual for 1915C will no longer be valid as of July 1st of this year. As we have mentioned before, however, our two processes for quality monitoring will be going forward and continue as they have been for the foreseeable future, that being the ECF quality monitoring process and the 1915C QA survey process. Since the provider manual is for 1915C is no longer going to be valid as of 7/1, we are deleting all references to it within our QA survey tools that we currently utilize. But for the foreseeable future, we will continue to monitor as we have monitored in the past. All of this going on simultaneously while a new aligned quality review process is under development. I hope that clarifies this issue. I know it can be a little bit confusing right now because so many things are shifting, but hopefully that will clarify where we are with how we will monitor as of 7/1. Thank you. Kara?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Pat. In July, providers will no longer be contracted with DIDD. What will the provider's relationship be with the DIDD regional offices? Turning this one over to Jordan.
Yep, thanks, Kara. Another great question. So as we've indicated, I think for the last couple of months, the single system design, the implementation of a total aligned system is going to be an iterative process that's going to last years. On 7/1, obviously, contracts will be initiated between managed care organizations and providers, and there will be some roles that are changing. In short, your relationship as a provider agency with the regional office in a lot of ways remains unchanged on 7/1. So the provider supports teams, for instance, will still be available for consultation. We'll still be following up on issues as they're identified in quality review surveys, or the incident management folks will still be handling incoming incidents. Investigations obviously will still be initiated by our Office of Investigations, and then follow-up will be occurring out of the regional offices. Therapy assists, all of those clinical indications will still be available to provider agencies. And so on 7/1, and honestly, in a lot of ways, going forward well into the future, your direct relationship with the regional offices won't change. Another thing that I want to highlight specifically, because I don't know that we've talked about it, at least in this format, is 1915C service plans, review of those plans, and then approval denial decisions will still be based out of the regional office on 7/1. At some point in the future, We certainly anticipate that utilization management, that service plan reviews will move over completely to the managed care organizations, but that won't be for some time. So really, as a point in time marker, 7/1 is the initiation of individual contracts with our network now to the managed care network, and then Courtney and her team and the implementation of a standardized unified planning document and planning approach will go into effect. Outside of that, there's not going to be a ton of change in the way you interact with your regional office.
Thanks, Jordan, for that excellent clarification. Okay, I have a job on this one, so I need to make sure that I do it. The REM training for DSPs appears to be somewhat non-functional at this time. When will it become operational? I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, and I am going to get my screen up to try to share something for her answer. Teresa.
Thanks, Kara. The training is functional. When you open up the training after responding yes to having viewed the alignment video, there's a next arrow button that must be selected at the bottom right of the screen for you to move on to the training. I think Kara has put that up right now. I know that's a little bit small, but down in the black border at the very bottom is an arrow. So you all just need to click on that and it will bring you straight into the training. If you have any other problems or questions, I just want to remind everyone that there is a specific mailbox for all things REM. If you can mail questions into that, we'll likely get them answered a lot faster than if you send them to office hours, as we answer those daily rather than once a week when we have office hours. Thanks, Kara.
Okay. Great, thank you very much, Teresa. And hopefully you all were able to see see my screen and see that diagram there in that graphic. Okay, where were we? What, if any, impact will the alignment have on blended home rates? Going to go back to Jordan for this one.
Yeah, thanks, Kara. Good question. And an easy response, it'll have no impact. As we've indicated, rate changes, with the exception of the addition of enabling technology benefits and the small changes to be able to provide additional funds for DSPs that are helping folks who choose to self-determine their healthcare tasks, there'll be no rate changes. So the blended rates will be unaffected by any changes implemented on 7/1.
All right, our next question is also going to go to Jordan. It's about training alignment. When should providers expect training alignment between all three waivers, HCBS, ECF, and DIDD? Right now, there are different trainings for each waiver for the same topics. Will all providers, including HCBS providers, now have access to Relias once the alignment is completed? Is there the possibility for agencies to use their own training in lieu of Relias for certain topics and their own training systems? Jordan.
Yeah, that's quite a few questions in there. So Kara, if I miss any, redirect. So in short, we're actively working right now on a single system of aligned training. And so being completely open and candid with this group, we began the process, did a crosswalk between the ECF training and the 1915C training. Internally at an executive level, we reviewed each of the training modules for both, came up with recommendations relative to an aligned system, and then initiated discussions, even with a smaller group within the TENCO organization, to talk a little bit about how those trainings, their feelings on frequency of recurrent trainings, on pre-service, post-service training, and that kind of stuff. What happened during that process is and many of you know this, a new set of, or a new menu of training for the Employment and Community First Choices program was developed by the Quilts team, and then it is anticipated that training would replace the current pre and immediate post-service training within the ECF program, and it's not available yet. Being piloted in Alabama currently, but again, to kind of expedite the response, until we have an opportunity to really review that training, it would be impossible, or at least foolhardy of us, to assume that we understand how that training differs from the current ECF training, and therefore making any decisions on a unified training menu won't be possible until we're able to thoroughly review that new ECF training. There was a follow-up in there, Kara. What was the second part or third part of that question?
Is there the possibility for agencies to use their own training in lieu of Relias for certain topics and their own training systems?
Yeah, I think that's something that we've talked about. Right now, the answer to that question is no. The trainings that are identified as required are the trainings that you have to have, and certainly those trainings that will be reviewed when quality review folks come in, or when you're re-credentialed going forward. But we do, and we will continue to have conversations about which trainings should be agency-led, agency-specific, as it pertains to individualized training that agencies develop on their own, and they want to provide access to their own staff or require their own staff outside of the DIDD regulatory environment or outside of the managed care organization's regulatory expectations going forward. Relias avails that opportunity currently. So if you have training curriculum or you have information that you want to share with your own staff at an interagency level, then Relias will allow you to do that. You can upload that and you can have your own staff take that training. Right now, we're going to stick to the training requirements that are in place. We're going to seek to unify the training menu, so there's a single set of training that is applied to the whole ECF and 1915C programs, and then the conversation will continue to evolve as to what it is agencies can and should be doing internally, and what it is the department, the managed care organizations, and TennCare need to be assuring from an information standpoint is getting to every staff person working in our system.
Great, thank you very much, Jordan. And you have another question. Is DIDD making an effort to reach out to ISCs, therapists, agencies, advocates, et cetera, to determine if there are wide-ranging concerns or detrimental effects of the staffing shortage, which was exacerbated by the pandemic? Are these stakeholders seeing a decline in people supported due to these staffing shortages and lack of outside monitoring or observations by others? Gonna turn that one over to Jordan.
Yeah, again, several layers to that one, so I'm going to try to hit each of them the best I can. As it pertains to the network volatility or the ability of our network to continue to function adequately through this period of pandemic, the department has been in almost constant contact with provider agencies that are experiencing very significant impacts. Usually those are staffing impacts, when thankfully, as it relates to the rate of positivity or people infected with the COVID-19 virus, we're seeing a very significant decline. In fact, Dr. Davis has provided statistics lately that show that thankfully our rate of infection and our mortality rate relative to the COVID-19 virus is really, really trending in a positive direction. But as you can imagine, early on, from April of 2020, well into the fall, there were periods where some agencies were just decimated, and by virtue of that, their staffing became incredibly tenuous. And I know on a whole across the network that staffing in and of itself is in a more difficult and tenuous position today than it ever has been in history. So yes, we are in contact with agencies. I would encourage anybody on the call, any agency within our network, to reach out to us. In fact, we're working right now very directly with several on staffing plans, adjusted staffing plans that help accommodate the impacts of the crisis on their agency. We have vowed and will continue to work with agencies on a one-to-one basis, with individual situations or even systemically. We're working with one agency across the state because they have been disproportionately impacted by staffing related to the crisis, the pandemic, obviously. And so we're working with them on a statewide basis. So we absolutely have and will continue to. As it relates specifically to a decline in service volume for any one agency or caseloads, for agencies. We do track network threshold indicators, so massive drops in revenue or immediate spiked increases in revenue or people served. And I can say that we've picked up no real discernible trend across the network that indicates less people in services. And so if that's the root of the question, that's not something that we've picked up right now in our trending.
All right, thank you very much, Jordan. Appreciate that. And the next question is also for you. We understand that providers are currently contracted to provide 1915C waiver services will be deemed able to provide ECF choices services on 7/1. Since complete system alignment will not be reached by then, what additional steps do providers need to take to provide services other than those they are contracted to provide prior to 7/1? Jordan.
Yeah, another really good question. So as you've indicated, on 7/1, provider agencies in the 1915C network, by virtue of the unified credentialing standards that we've talked a little bit about, will be deemed eligible to provide services in the ECF network also. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to make absolutely sure I'm pointing out here, and I think that they pertain to the second part of the question. Those relationships, the provision of ECF services is initiated by contract with each individual MCO agency or MCO organization. Each of those MCO organizations have a little bit different approach as to how they ready a provider agency to provide services in the ECF program. So as you guys know, the vast majority of providers in the ECF network are also providers in the 1915C network. In fact, it was only a handful that were ECF only when we did a total network study not long ago. But there are several agencies within the 1915C network that are not, in fact, contracted to provide ECF services. So in those cases, there are several different services in the ECF menu of supports that are not in the 1915C service menu. There are pretty radical differences in expectations to the more traditional residential supports in the ECF program. Those have to deal very directly with expectation relative to direct staffing. So there'll be familiarity concepts that you need to make sure that you understand. And then what I would do is post 7/1, after initiation of the contract, reach out to your contact at each managed care organization and ask them about their ECF network readiness program or approach. And then each MCO will describe to you what their expectations are, and some may even have training opportunities for agencies that are not already providing ECF services that need a little bit more information.
Thank you very much, Jordan. You can take a couple of sips of drink because the next question is for Teresa. When we have a rights restriction or psychotropic medication issue that needs HRC intervention, we know what to do with the way DIDD rules operate now. What will this look like with integration coming for ECF and Choices members? Teresa.
Thanks, Kara. As far as the 1915C waivers will operate, we'll still follow the same process of using the HRCs. In regards to services that are run through the MCOs, the ECF program, the MCOs will still have their HCBS setting compliance committees that they currently operate. So on 7/1, everything will remain the same. You will either go to the MCOs, to their compliance committee, or you will go to the DIDD HRC, depending upon waiver program. And I think that will be looked at going forward. But on 7/1, that's the way it will still operate.
Thanks a lot, Teresa. When the state is contracting with MCO for DIDD service delivery, will the behavioral health crisis response teams be available to all of the people providers serve in ECF and Choices? So Dr. Davis is out of the office today, so we will take this one away and we will get an answer for you on this one in the next office hours. Next question. Will there be expectations for providers to be meeting any certain status to contract with MCOs, such as getting a CQL Agency of Distinction accreditation or some other preferred provider qualification after the initial change? I'm going to go back to Jordan.
Yep, another great question. One of the things, just an observation, it's the gamut of questions this week really does begin to dip well below the surface level, which is a really encouraging sign, I think, for all of us. It shows that provider agencies are really starting to think through this second and third level layered approach to the 7-1 integration. So here are the requirements as they pertain directly to a unified credentialing approach. So credentialing standards are in the process of being developed at this point and agreed upon by the department and the managed care organizations, obviously with TennCare input also. At the point at which those credentialing standards are in place, then any additional credentialing standards that a managed care organization would seek to levy on their individual network will have to run through a review and approval process. And so in short, an MCO can't take additional credentialing standards and pile them on top of the unified credentialing standards that we're working on right now. So when you speak specifically about accreditation requirements through CQL or other, as we've talked about, kind of, again, now peering into the future, 12, 18, 24 months, certainly we are going to continue to aggressively push for capacity building components within the network. So we are going to seek to push skill building and person-centered approach. CQL, obviously for us, is the gold standard in that endeavor. We're certainly going to continue to push for accreditation and technology first approach for agencies. We in fact have one right now. A shout out to Core Services, who is the first nationally accredited technology first agency. And we have several that are right in the wings behind them to be accredited. And we're going to continue to push for skill building as it pertains to pre and job coaching and employment services. And so as we build those components into credentialing requirements, the intent will be to identify, each individual threshold of achievement, seek to incentivize the completion of each of those thresholds through a value-based payment approach, thus offsetting the cost to some degree for provider agencies as they build these skills. And then ultimately, at a point in time where it's reasonable to do so. So again, could be a couple, could be 3 years out, those will become credentialing standards. As it pertains to 7-1, it will be the unified set of credentialing standards that the department, TennCare, and the MCOs agree upon that will be your required credentialing standards and nothing in excess of that.
Thanks a lot, Jordan. And I will make mention of the fact that Michelle Bagby, who is the director of the TN START AST and the crisis stabilization teams, has answered that prior question, saying that they are working on a phased rollout for the behavioral health crisis response teams, and to keep an eye on the website. And she did send a link to that website. So that's where some of that information will be found. Last question is, how far along is the planning of the new integration, or what more can you share now that you didn't know a month ago? Jordan.
Yeah, there's really not much more to share. I mean, I'm certainly not intending to be cryptic and being completely candid with our audience. We are working as many hours a day as we can all stay awake on ensuring that the 7-1 implementation goes off as planned. We have absolutely every confidence at this point that that'll happen. After 7-1, once we get contracts, I do want to pause real quick and pivot back to the survey that we sent out. Gosh, it's been over a week ago now, and then we resent to several agencies. I want to call your attention to the 5-question survey relative to the services that each agency is providing and the counties within which you provide those services. Unfortunately, we got a ton of information back from provider agencies that was inaccurate or incomplete, provider agencies failing to put their provider number in, for instance, or leaving some fields completely blank. The intent with that survey was and continues to be to expedite the process by which you can initiate your individual contracts with the managed care organization. So as I said last week, and as was indicated in the email, That's not information that the department, for instance, is requesting to have on file. That was and is information that is intended only to allow you to initiate your individual contracts. So that is an assist to every agency in our network on behalf of the department to help streamline the approach of you getting your contracts in place. So between now and 7/1, our pure focus is to make sure that every agency that needs to be contracted with has begun and completed that process, so we don't have any interruption in continuity of service, to ensure that the planning process, as identified by Courtney Kelly and her team and agreed upon by the managed care organizations, is implemented smoothly, and then to continue work, obviously, on credentialing going forward once we have that unified credentialing approach in place. So there's nothing that we haven't discussed on the horizon right now. It's full steam ahead with ensuring that we can get the 7/1 implementation in place. And then we'll talk about what happens after 7/1 once we've assured all those. Excuse me.
All right, thank you very much, Jordan. So we are going to start going to questions in the chat. That is the end of our questions that were pre-submitted. And once again, thank you all very much for getting those questions in. We had a lot of great ones. The REM training currently includes a YouTube video and the 106-slide REM training presentation, which is a duplication of the video. Do staff need to review both of these? And if so, is there a plan to condense this? I am going to turn this one over to Teresa Sloan.
Hey, Kara, thank you. I want to kind of start with just going back to last week's office hours. During last week's office hours, we were asked by multiple providers, and I think I even received a follow-up email from Melanie, which was very helpful, about the video for DSPs that was a video of the overall system. And that's a video that Debbie is referencing here. That video had only been available on the internet. They asked if that video could be put into Relias. So we did that as an option. So there's an option to either watch that video on our REM website or to go and watch the video within Relias. You do not need to do both. The video is there, it's separate. You don't need to watch it both online and then go and watch it in Relias. The video is an overall view of the entire system, right? This is for everyone to watch. This is how is this whole new reportable event management system going to work? The actual slides that Debbie is speaking of are about reporting. They're how to report with examples of how to report and a competency test at the end. And I want to address that as well. We did a rollout pilot of the training. And during the pilot of this training, there were no questions. There was no little bitty test at the end to be sure people were understanding the content. During the pilot project, providers asked that we put in a test at the end so that they were sure that people who were taking the training were actually absorbing what they were supposed to, since reporting is such an important aspect of the program. We added that. Now, I do want to let providers know that there are 20 questions that we pull with a pool of 20 questions that test pulls from. Each test has 10 questions on it, 5 of which are going to be questions that were examples in the training, word for word, exact examples in the training. So if you have any other questions about that, please let me know. But Debbie, they're not the same. One is an overall view of the whole system, and the other is reporting. And again, all of these videos or all these trainings have been done with piloting and with contribution from stakeholders as well as MCOs. And we're just happy that they're finally at a point where we're rolling them out to get everyone ready for the new system. If you have any other questions, you can email them to the REM mailbox or you can contact me directly. But again, I want to reiterate, if your staff have watched the video on the website, they do not need to go and watch the video in Relias. They can just, when they go into the REF training, which is the slides that are referenced here, and it's about reporting, there is a little acknowledgement, which is what Kara showed up above before, where you can check yes, that you've watched the video, And then you click that little arrow in the black border at the bottom on the right to move into the slides. I hope that helped with answering the question. If not, Debbie, you can just email me and I can provide any other answers you might need. Thanks, Kara.
Okay, thank you very much, Teresa. With Appendix K, staffing allowances in effect, is that what providers should be using or only if needed? Jordan, can you take this question?
Yeah, good question. I switched audio. I got a couple of comments saying that my audio was going in and out, so I switched to my phone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've got you. Yeah.
All right, good question. So yeah, the Appendix K flexibilities will continue to be in effect at this point now until up to 6 months after the conclusion of the pandemic. Now, I want to add the caveat to that doesn't mean that all of the same flexibilities that we've been utilizing thus far will be used that long. It just means that we as a state have the ability to allow those flexibilities to be utilized until 6 months after the end of the public health emergency. So certainly we would communicate well in advance of pulling back any of those flexibilities. So as it pertains to the utilization of those flexibilities, there are two things I want to point out. The first is those flexibilities are not a requirement. So the staffing flexibilities, for instance, that we issued and some agencies have utilized during the course of the pandemic are certainly not required ratios. They would be available if needed. The impression that I get from most agencies with whom we're still in pretty frequent contact with about staffing issues is that despite the fact that thankfully we're seeing a reduction in the number of people infected, we're seeing much higher rates of people getting vaccinated, and that's translating to some degree of relative stability, again, only as juxtaposed against the worst of the worst months. Certainly not back to pre-pandemic levels, but some agencies are reporting a bit of stability now with their staff bodies beginning to take hold, while others are still stretched completely thin. So the availability is there to utilize those flexibilities. It's not mandated that agencies do it. And certainly, you know, the underlying expectation always has been and will continue to be that the support needs of the person are met. And so there is no additional flexibility. There is no standard that would allow for services that don't meet the needs of the individual to be rendered or billed for. But outside of that, we need to be able to and want to be able to work with each agency as we understand the hardships that have been placed on agencies throughout this pandemic.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Okay, another question for you. We have reached out to our MCO representatives about when providers will be getting the updated manuals with not much info up to this point. We would really like to be able to review the TennCare policies and the MCO manuals if we can get at least 60 days prior to live date or sooner if possible. Is or could DIDD help with getting this info to providers as soon as possible? Jordan.
Yeah, I'm actually going to turn this over to Teresa because I know that she's been the one working very directly with the MCOs on the policy stuff. Teresa, I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Jordan. Again, as far as the provider manual goes, those are going to be the MCO's provider manuals, right? So whereas we provided some clarifications, we answered some questions pertaining to some of the processes, you know, such as complaint resolution processes that we are still going to be handling on 7-1. Ultimately, they are their provider manuals, and we don't really have information as to when they'll be completed or when they'll be done. So that's really something that's going to have to go to the MCOs. And if you're not getting answers, we can try to follow up on that. But for this forum, we just don't have that answer. As far as policies go, I think we're referring to protocols, I would believe, such as REM protocols that are effective on both providers, MCOs, and DIDD. As those are being completed, they are being posted. The REM protocol is up on the DIDD website. Likewise, there is a link to the Dignity of Choice protocol on the REM website that will take you to the TennCare website. So I'm hoping that answers the question. I think everyone's working really hard to get the material posted as quickly as possible. As we're all kind of rushing to get it, well, not rushing, as we're all kind of moving towards the finish line on trying to get everything ready for launch. Did that answer the question, Kara?
I think you did, Teresa. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got time for one more. We've got time for one more question. So, and I know that Commissioner answered this in chat, but there are many staff that refuse to get the vaccine, which makes many supported people and family members uncomfortable. Will or can DIDD mandate staff to be vaccinated? Commissioner, do you just want to reiterate what you put in chat?
Yeah, it's thanks, Kara. It's a pretty simple answer. The answer is no. DIDD is not going to be putting out any type of mandates for employees, and certainly not for private organizations. That's not appropriate. That's an individual choice and a company decision, but DIDD will not be creating a mandate for the vaccine.
Okay, and we are just about at time. This was a very productive, I think, office hours. I think it was a very good, varied one. You got to see the inside of a lot of our offices because we spread the love around when it came to answering some of the questions. So we appreciate your time with us, and I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Turner to see us all out.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Again, a lot of good questions. I want to thank our leadership team for engaging, providing some of those answers as well. A lot of very challenging questions, but very necessary questions submitted by our provider network and our partners in the provider network. So thank you for participating. As Kara said, we always appreciate your engagement. A lot of good questions come out of this. I think office hours have been extremely beneficial for our relationship, but also as another communication channel that we can utilize with the provider network, given the climate that we're in with COVID. But hopefully, as things start opening up, we're going to be able to get back on the road again and come see some of you guys and check out all the great work that you're doing on behalf of Person Supported. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks, Kara.
Okay, thank you all so much for joining us this week. We hope you found this useful, and we look forward to our time next week. Once again, a reminder, please send questions early if you can. We will always do them first, and you can tell that they took up the majority of our time this week. So we always want to be able to provide you with the best answers that we can, and we hope that we're able to do that. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.